You know, some stories from the past, they aren't really about the past at all. They're about right now. Let's go back to the spring of 1918. World War I is raging across the ocean, but there was a totally different kind of war being fought right here at home.
And this was the label that was being slapped on one particular group, the Industrial Workers of the World, or the IWW. They were basically painted as the monster under the bed of American industry, the bad guy in a story being told from coast to coast. So you gotta wonder, right? How does a group of workers become a national threat? Well, at the height of the war, you had newspapers, politicians, employers, all painting this one very specific and very scary picture. The IWW, they said, weren't just workers, they were the enemy within.
And what's wild is how effective these labels were. I mean, think about it. The country's at war, patriotism is through the roof. In that kind of environment, any kind of dissent, any questioning of the status quo could easily be spun as being disloyal. The IWW basically became a catch-all for every fear society had. They were the perfect target for a nation totally on edge.
But then, right in the middle of all this chaos and noise, a small pamphlet gets published by a civil liberties group. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but it did something that, at the time, was incredibly radical. It just asked a question. It suggested that maybe, just maybe, we didn't have the whole story.
And this was it. This was the simple but devastating question at the heart of the whole thing. It just sliced right through all the hysteria and basically asked people to do one thing. Just look a little closer. To forget the caricature, forget the boogeyman for a second, and just ask, who are these people really? So who were they? I mean, was this some shadowy conspiracy? A well-funded group of foreign agents trying to bring down the country? Well, the truth, as that little pamphlet showed, was something a lot less sensational and a whole lot more telling about what America was actually like at the time. This slide just lays it all out, doesn't it? The IWW wasn't a conspiracy. It was a movement made up of the most invisible people in the entire economy. These were the guys harvesting the crops, cutting the timber, moving the freight. They were literally the backbone of industry, but they were treated like ghosts. They had no real place in the very society they were building. And let's talk about why this movement even existed in the first place. The conditions were just brutal. And this number tells you everything you need to know. For a family to have a decent shot, you needed about $800 a year. A huge chunk of these workers were making barely half that. So this movement, it wasn't born from some foreign ideology. It was born right out of American reality. Okay, so what was their solution? Now, yeah, it was radical, but it was a direct answer to their situation. They basically looked around and said, this whole system is broken. Their goal wasn't just chaos. It was a complete reimagining of how the economy works. A world where the people actually doing the work get a real say. All right, let's tackle the big, scary word they threw at them, sabotage. The myth, the story everyone was told was all about dynamite and destruction, right? But the reality of how the IWW actually used that word was totally different. For them, it was about pressure. It was about a collective, conscious slowdown. It was about using the only thing they had, their labor, as leverage. It was never about violence. So what happens when a system is faced with a message it really, really doesn't want to hear? Well, the story of the IWW shows us a pattern that's as old as time. If you can't fix the problem, you just make it illegal to complain about it. This quote just nails it. The IWW was basically a giant flashing sign telling America that its system was failing a huge number of people. But instead of reading the sign, the powerful institutions chose to just smash it, to crush the messenger so they wouldn't have to hear the message. And the crackdown was incredibly fast and brutal. This timeline shows how entering World War I gave them the perfect excuse. With new laws like the Espionage Act, the government could launch these massive, nationwide raids, followed by mass trials, all designed to just completely dismantle the entire organization. And this, right here, is the core argument of that little 1918 pamphlet. It's so powerful. At the end of the day, the legal assault, it wasn't really about national security. It was about taking a legitimate cry for economic dignity and redefining it as a criminal conspiracy. So, why does any of this matter now? Why are we talking about a 100-year-old story about a radical labor union? Because these patterns of power, of dissent, of who gets listened to and who gets silenced, they're timeless. The story of the IWW is like a mirror, and it reflects things about our society that are just as true today. I absolutely love this quote because it totally flips the script on what it means to rebel. The IWW didn't happen because its members hated America. It happened because they believed in a version of America that could actually live up to its promises of dignity for everyone, including them. Their rebellion, in a way, was an act of faith. And that's really the big takeaway for all of us, isn't it? In every era, there are groups on the outside, the so-called troublemakers, who are really just pointing out the cracks in the foundation. And every generation, including ours, faces the same choice. Do we try to silence them, or do we have the courage to actually listen and evolve because of what they're showing us? So, I'm going to leave you with the very same challenge that 1918 pamphlet did. The next time you see a movement that makes you angry or uncomfortable, just pause and ask yourself this question. Is what you're seeing really a threat, or is it maybe just a mirror, reflecting a problem that we as a society would rather not look at? The answer to that question might just define our future.